Well, and you probably don't care about this subject, but instead, we're going to talk about sexual economics.
Those two words don't normally go together, my friend.
But they do. They do. And the reason that this is important is because you guys are the people that I'm going to forecast something that's really disastrous for our country, for our culture, and stuff like that. And you are the agents of change on this. You're the people that can help lead the change on this whole thing of sexual economics. And this is a talk that I've given a number of times to in different conferences that I've gone to. Some of this information you may be aware of, but it's not per se a Bible study. But what it is, it's looking at our culture through the lens of our faith, and seeing what happens when you abandon that faith and where it leads us, okay? And it has a lot of everything. So the premise is, God in his wisdom is proved smarter than human beings, and following his precepts is not only better for individuals, it's better for societies, nations, and all of humanity, spiritually, socially, physically, and economically. That's the premise, okay? So Nietzsche, I don't know if you know what Nietzsche is. Nietzsche was a philosopher. He wasn't particularly a Christian, but he said this. He said, if modern science provides an inadequate basis for the development of moral thought, in other words, by looking at science, you can't really have a basis for moral thought. And if modern science has undermined the authority of classical moral philosophy and theology, then what is left for humans to rely on in their quest to find moral guidance for their life? And the answer is nothing. So put it in a little easier English. If there is really no moral basis for making decisions, if it's up to everybody to do whatever they want, there is no such thing as moral guidance for our life. It's a free-for-all. We all do whatever we want to do. Nietzsche's basically saying that we're going to be in real trouble here. There's nothing that's going to give us any guidance for our life. Okay? And when that happens, well, like one great writer said, if there is no God, then everything is permissible. Okay? If there's no God, you can't say this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, at least based on something outside of yourself. You can only say, I think this is good, I think this is right, I think this is wrong, I think this is bad. If you get two people to agree, if you get somebody to agree with you, you can say, we think this is good, we think this is right, we think this is wrong. Doesn't make that it is. There is no definitive final authority. It's just whoever wields the most power. Hey, welcome. Whoever wields the most power, whoever has the most influence, whoever has most economics, okay? So, the rules of our culture. Okay? One may not criticize someone else's life, right? Isn't that one of the rules of our culture? You can't criticize someone else's life unless they voted for Donald Trump, okay? You can't criticize their choices or their behaviors, okay? Because everybody gets to choose their own path, that kind of thing. One may not behave in a manner that coerces or causes harm to others. Okay, so that's a rule that our culture is saying. You can't do anything that causes harm to others. One may not engage in sexual relationships with someone without his or her consent. Would you agree that these are kind of the rules of our culture? Okay.
The last one's broken a lot.
Yeah, they're not the rules that aren't broken, but these are sort of the standard rules that our culture has given us, okay? So God's will stands against any sex, straight, gay, polyamorous, all that kind of, outside of marriage, marriage for anyone other than one man and one woman, divorce except for certain circumstances, and that marriage is God ordained and to be celebrated and encouraged. Wouldn't you agree that that's the Christian standard? Okay, that's the standard we're coming to the table with. That we're going, wait. These are actually rules that need to be engaged. They need to be put into action. So you can tell right away we're going to be in conflict with our culture. Because all of a sudden we're going, no, there are rules. And these are the rules. So the big quest for you guys is how are you going to be able to explain to people why these rules are worth following? You know, and you can say, well, because I believe. Because you could go, well, because God said so. Okay, but is there anything outside of God, for somebody maybe doesn't even believe in God, that would help show that these rules actually do make sense, and inadvertently actually point back to God being smarter and wiser than anybody. Okay, and that's part of what I want to share with you. Okay, in America, these are some stats. 43% of children are born out of wedlock. Okay, that means parents aren't married, right? 74% of African American kids are born out of wedlock. In 1964, only 7% of kids were born out of wedlock. What does that tell you?
The standard is falling away.
Yeah. Standard is falling away.
Not really much of a rule anymore.
Yeah, it's some, yeah. But you can see how things have changed since 1964. When everybody in society, only 7% of kids were born outside of a married couple. Now, and by the way, these figures are climbing. I think these are a little stale. I think it's more like 48% of kids who are not black are born out, and it's closer to 80% now of black kids are born outside of wedlock, right? And the chances of somebody sustaining a relationship when they're not married are really, really low. Okay? And so the result of this is that the growth of welfare, the welfare system, government providing money, government stepping in and being the father, because of people violating God's precepts on sexuality and work ethic, the end up spending is unsustainable, and it will drive the United States into bankruptcy if it's allowed to continue. In other words, you can't have that many people depending on the government for their sustenance because the dad runs off or the dad isn't willing to take care of the family and they go to the government for handouts. Eventually, it becomes unsustainable. And you have so many people getting government money that the government just collapses in on itself. But there's never been a situation like this before in the history of the United States, in the history of the world, by the way, where the government is being forced by the vote of the people or by the vote of their representatives to take care of people who are shirking their responsibility. Because as you can see from the statistics, back in '64, only 7% of the population was doing this. Now, it's increased to the point where it's going to be really unsustainable in your lifetime. Okay? And you don't have to be a believer to see that current sexual morality is creating a situation that cannot be maintained. Okay? So,
By the government?
by the culture that we're in. So the culminative effect of the data determines that any sexual system other than traditional marriage creates situations that ultimately cost governments money, either in welfare, health, social services, courts, or police security. All right? Let me give you a reason why. Okay? And by the way, on the contrary, many studies confirm that throughout the West, religiosity is associated with institutionally strong marriages. In other words, put in regular English, the more you go to work, more often you go to church, the more likely your families are going to be together and your marriages are going to be together. And while secularism correlates with weakening of marriage, okay? So the more you're involved in marriage, the more likely you're going to have a family bond, more likely you're not going to get divorced, and more likely that you're going to have a healthy environment, right? The more people that live outside of the boundaries of sexual standards, the more it ends up costing. That's why this is sexual economics. There is a price for the sexual revolution. And in the end, the experiment of this era will fail simply because it creates more problems than the freedom it presumes to offer. All right? So here's some of the reasons why. Marriage increases the likelihood that fathers and mothers will have a good relationship with their children. Cohabitation, you hear people say this all the time. Well, we don't need a piece of paper to be married, right? Oh, we don't need a piece of paper. We just, we're going to be together as long as love lasts and things like that. Cohabitation is not really the equivalent of marriage. 50% of children see their cohabitating parents separated, as opposed to 15% of kids whose parents are married. And cohabitating couples act more like singles than they do married people. They shoulder less responsibility than in a marriage contract. Okay? Growing up outside of intact marriage increases the likelihood that children themselves will be divorced or become unwed parents. It goes way up. So the idea is, if your parents aren't married, you're likely not to be married either. Okay? If your parents had you out of wedlock, the chances are you're going to have kids out of wedlock yourself. It has important biosocial consequences for children and adults. Okay? And this is physical stuff. Adolescent girls who grow up apart from an intact married household are significantly more likely to have early menstruation, premature sexual activity, and teenage pregnancies. Okay? And these, by the way, these are not Christian, this is not Christian data. This is secular data that I gathered in order to basically say, you guys, Christianity's onto something. Okay? And the way the secular world's building their ship, they're building a Titanic. It's designed to sink. Divorce and unmarried childbearing increases poverty for both children and mothers in particular. All right? And what's happening in the United States right now, there's a divide going on. And the divide is really an interesting one. And it's primarily between two groups of people. One group of people who don't have children, get married, don't have children until they get married, and get a high school education, just a high school education. They don't have to give a college education. But they wait till they're married before they have children, get a high school education, and people that have kids outside of marriage or bail out of high school, the difference in economic standards are radical, just with those separate things. Because the one group ends up perpetuating itself and ends up on welfare with kids that are on welfare and families that are on welfare, and the other group actually is able to be stable and pull themselves out of economic calamity because they've done things in the right order. You know, they get a high school education, they get a job, they get married, they have kids, and they pull themselves out of poverty. And what you're seeing in America is it's basically a system that is going to resemble in the future kind of like what the British used to have when they had classes. You know, they had class systems. You had the royalty, and then you had the nobleman class, and then you had the guys who were working with craftsmiths and stuff like that, and then you had the labor class, and you couldn't really get from one class to another. What you're seeing in America right now is is separate classes, and it's going to be really hard for people in the lower class to get up to the upper one because, well, frankly, let's put it this way. If you guys, once you guys are in the age where you're thinking of getting married, right? Let's say you're 24, 25 years old, you're thinking of getting married. You meet this gal, she's 21 years old, but she's dragging 2 or 3 kids by different guys behind her. What do you think the odds are that you're going to want to marry her? You'd take quite a remarkable guy to take on that responsibility and all the drama that goes with it, right? Because every one of those kids with every one of those dads has got drama behind it. I mean, we have some gals that go to our church. I mean, they're really sweet gals. One of them has 5 kids by 5 different guys. Okay? She works hard. She has a job. She works hard, but she can't make ends meet. She's entirely dependent on welfare to be able to survive because the husbands, none of them pay her child support. None of them. And she doesn't want to go to court and force that because she doesn't want those fathers, because they're a bunch of derelict guys, involved in the lives of her children, making them derelict. And so guess who's supporting her? Well, the church is helping, actually. But guess who's really supporting her? You guys. Your parents, their jobs, and in the future, your jobs. You're going to support her choices. And what do you think her odds are? This gal's in her 30s. What do you think her odds are of finding a husband? Yeah, like really. I mean, she can definitely find guys who will go to bed with her. That's not a problem. But finding a husband who's going to want to take on that ain't going to happen. So she's doomed. By her choices, she's doomed herself to either repeating the situation of rotating guys into her life just so she's not lonely, or being stuck a single mom, hoping that one of her kids does well and is going to go on to support her, right? By the way, what do you think a church's role with somebody like that in? What can we do to help that kind of a person?
Donate food.
Huh?
Donate food.
Okay, you can donate food. How can we help? How can we help? Is there any way we can help her out of the hole she's dug herself into?
Raise money for her. Give her a job.
But then we become her father, right?
Give her a job.
Or give her a job so she can work.
Or help her find a job.
Okay, yeah,
There were kids like send the kids to go on Wednesday nights.
all right. That would be one thing. You could take her kids and help prevent this from replicating in their lives, right? One of her kids is actually in high school, and we've promised to put that kid through Bible college if they want to go. I said, we will pay for that kid to go to Bible college so that, she's in a whole different environment and stuff like that. And, but it's a really tough one to be able to find a solution for somebody that's dug them in a hole that bad, that deep. We'd love for you to meet single guys, but the single guy is going, yep, not sorry. I don't want that kind of responsibility on my shoulders. Now, granted, she's got a lot more kids, but a lot of guys feel like that with somebody with one or two. And parental divorce or failure to marry appears to increase the children's risk of school failure, going to college, or achieving a high-status job. So if your parents are divorced, now it doesn't mean it's impossible. Some of you have parents that are divorced and you're making it through. But statistically, it's much lower level because of parents who were never married or divorced for their kids to go on and make it through school. Children who live with their own two married parents enjoy better physical health on average than children in other family forms. Why do you think that is? Why do you think your health, if you're from married?
They have consistent food. They have consistent sleep. They have probably not as much introduction to drugs and alcohol.
Okay.
My relatives are more worried about taking care of other people in the household. They don't worry about themselves so much.
Okay.
All the money from the teenager goes straight back into the family, and so they don't really get to choose anything for themselves. So they don't really prioritize their own health.
Where do they tend to build fast? Do you know where they tend to build fast food restaurants besides malls?
Colleges.
Huh?
Colleges.
Yeah, in colleges. Ghettos. Fast food restaurants are built in ghettos. Why?
Cheap.
It's cheap. Okay.
Not really.
Pardon? That's where the market is, yeah. That people with low incomes oftentimes will go to fast food restaurants, and that affects their health. Or they have diets that they're buying,
Taco Bell 3 times.
they're buying food that's filling, but not necessarily food that's good. And so their health of kids who come from broken homes is usually worse than from single homes. Children whose parents divorce have a higher rate of psychological distress and mental illness. And children are extremely susceptible to the crises of their parents. If their parents are unstable, it helps create an environment where they're unstable. And they don't necessarily carry the sins of their parents, but what they do is they carry the damage of their parents. Does that make sense? They carry this, oftentimes the lack of dependability, oftentimes they're tweaked in some way. And so they oftentimes are far more mentally capable of sustaining a healthy relationship as they grow older because of their parents are divorced. Boys raised in a single family are more likely to engage in delinquent and criminal behavior. This is a fact that's beyond anybody, no matter what side of the aisle they're on, everybody acknowledges this, that gang members almost all come from homes without a dad. And the reason they're in a gang it's a family, and there's an older guy who's the father figure, right? Girls who are being trafficked, most of the girls being trafficked are coming from broken homes. A lot of them have already been abused in their homes, and so they end up in the prison system, and start out as juveniles, and they end up as adults in the prison system, and it can all be traced back to the home situation, and they're far more likely to go to jail. If you're going to jail and you just take a poll of the prisoners, the vast majority of them come from broken families. Okay? Child who's not living with his or her own two married parents is at greater risk for child abuse. Like I said, trafficking and all that other kinds of stuff take place. Part of it because there's no protector. Usually most children live with the mother, correct? It's almost universal. In fact, it's super rare for a mom to abandon her children. Okay? But when they live with two parents, the father is out of the picture. The mother's often busy or having to farm out the kids, and she doesn't have the ability to watch over them. And there's not necessarily a fear factor. If there's a father in a house and you want to mess around with somebody's kid, you think twice. Because that guy's going to show up with a shotgun, That guy will come rip your head off. But pervs aren't as worried about what a mother will do. And so for numerous different factors, those kids are more likely to be at risk for child abuse. Those are statistics. I got a bunch of these from this thing here, but I want to just ask you guys this. With those kinds of things, what does it tell you? What does it give you as a Christian as a way to turn the boat? Can you think of any ways that you can turn the boat?
By doing the opposite.
Okay. Number one, live differently. You live differently. You make those choices, You grab those standards. Now, you can't control what somebody else does to you. Life is kind of weird that way, But you can determine that you're going to live by those kinds of standards, yeah.
I think we can help make people aware, because our culture is aware of all those issues, but they attack it at the surface level, and they try solving the problems from where it is at the top. And I feel like if they're aware of the issue being the sexual immorality at the root, then as a group or as a nation, we'd be able to attack it better.
Okay. Hi, yeah.
You can put yourself in, you can help kids who were born in situations like that, encourage them that they have better.
Okay. All right. You can get involved. One of the things we can do is what some of you are doing right now. You're working with teenagers who come from really funky homes. And you can actually take those kids and by your influence, you can influence them so that they don't replicate that. Yeah? When I was growing up, everybody smoked cigarettes. I mean, everybody smoked cigarettes. In fact, if you join the Army, they give you your helmet and they give you a box of cigarettes, complimentary of Marlboro or whatever cigarette companies would get them, because they wanted everybody to smoke cigarettes, right? Every guy on television smoked cigarettes. When you went on an airplane, there was a no smoking section that was right behind the smoking section. So it did you a lot of good, right? Every restaurant, for Christmas in shop, we would make ashtrays for our parents. It was just that common, right? Why do you think most of your friends, they might vape, some of you might vape, but why do you think smoking just dove?
Because they thought it was bad for you.
Well, they knew it was bad already. They knew it was bad.
Because so many people died from it? They saw people die, or
No,
were told
no.
about it?
Yeah.
Clever advertising.
What?
Clever advertising
For what?
against cigarettes.
Exactly right.
Make it look like.
What happened is they decided we need to turn this ship around. What we need to do is because most people start smoking when they're what? Teenage, 11, 12, that kind of 13. They start smoking for this, probably if you smoked a cigarette, you probably was somewhere in that age, so just going to try it. But when it was cool, right, then you're doing it because it's cool. And what they said, what we need to do is we need to make smoking uncool. And so they got a huge campaign. They got these real popular models. I can't remember the name of one of them, one of the gals, but she would appear on these magazine ads. She had cigarettes sticking out of her ears, out of her nose. You know, she was mocking people who smoke cigarettes, right? And they went on this giant campaign.
Who's they?
The government.
Oh.
The government decided we're gonna try to influence people not to smoke cigarettes, and so they made it really uncool. And within a couple of years, not only that, they were able to get people to pass laws. So on an airplane, you just couldn't smoke. Non-smoking sections were outside, not inside, things like that. Smoking sections were outside, not inside. But primarily, they used advertising. They used their version of social media and social capital to say, this is totally uncool. You guys are experts at manipulating social media and creating messages. If you wanted to, you could help create messages that would attack something like this and make uncool what everybody just assumes is normal, you know? And you can turn it around. That's one piece of the puzzle, but can be turned around like that, because I've seen that actually happen. How else do you think you could do it? Any other ways? How many of you guys vote? You're 18, right? You can vote when you're... Yeah. Yeah. So what can a voter do?
Vote.
Yeah. What kind of laws would you pass that could be both benevolent and yet... Anybody know what workfare is? Ever heard of workfare? Heard of welfare? Mm-hmm. What's welfare?
Money for not working.
Right. What's workfare?
Money for working.
Right. So you could pass laws on workfare that said this. Okay, you got a bunch of kids out of wedlock? Yeah, we'll support you, but we're only going to give you a check if you go to work. And they go, well, what about my kids? Well, just bring them to this daycare, because there's other gals that are out of work, and their job is going to be to watch your kids while you go and do this other job that we have set up. You know, whether it's picking up trash along the side of the road or whatever it is, but you enforce workfare, and you tell people that from now on you don't just get money for nothing. You're going to spend your afternoons, your days doing this. Somebody will watch your kid, and that's how they're working. And you create a welfare system that doesn't just hand out money, but it forces people to work. Why is that a good idea besides economics?
Work ethic.
Okay, you get a work ethic. Yeah.
Doesn't encourage people to just have more kids and keep privileged.
Yeah, you start thinking about it, you're going, shoots, you know, I'm going to be working the rest of my life. The more I have kids, the more I'm going to have to, they'll be on the dole, the more I have to work.
There would be, I guess, a lot of mental benefits to being active and actually working for your money and not just sitting around.
Yeah. And-
Why are we talking about still giving money in the first place? Like, if you're not giving money at all.
Because we're
that's
compassionate.
all.
Because
But there's compassion, but there's compassion can go through other modes in the government.
it can. But say you felt you were obliged to have to help this gal out. Her husband ran off to Mexico, and you were going to find him again. You know, you can't go after the husband, so you got to try to help this gal out, who either out of her own choices, her own stupidity, or just because the guy she married with is a snap case, she ran off. You have to have some form. Yeah.
It puts the responsibility back on the parents' shoulders.
Exactly. Puts the responsibility on that person to grow up and take responsibility and work. And like you said, there's something psychological about working. Work brings dignity. You ever noticed with your own self, if you just get given stuff, you don't take care of it as much as the thing that you had to bust your butt and save and scratch, you know, that thing, you take care of it. The stuff somebody just gives you, well, easy come, easy go. And human beings are all built the same way. We take care of things that we have to work for more than things that we don't have to work for. And so that gives dignity to people. Okay? What other laws, if you're going to, since you're voters, what other laws would you, and by the way, and since hopefully some of you will be in a position where you can actually help bring some of these laws to the table, or pressure your representatives to bring some of these laws to the table. Any other laws that might slow this down?
Educational laws,
Okay. All right.
inform.
Okay.
I mean, my state is going the complete opposite right now. So honestly, taking laws out that are for telling kids they're not a boy or girl starting at age 5 preschool.
So they're taking that laws out.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, good. What about, yeah?
I don't know if this necessarily would be a law, but you said the government had an ad campaign against cigarettes. What if we started an ad campaign against like sexual immorality?
Yeah.
Like,
Why not?
I mean, most movies promote it like it's something that everybody like that's cool.
You make the ring the thing, you know?
Yeah.
Just do something, you know, I mean, guys, people in advertising are really clever. And they could make putting the ring on the thing that you go, that's what man, we need to be doing that, you know? You could create that kind of movement.
In that case, then entertainment.
Right.
What, you know, if you're a writer, if you're a videographer, if you're whatever, making good content for people to watch.
Yeah, more Pride and Prejudice, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. And how about this? Go after the guys. I mean, you know, it takes two people to have a baby. If you know that they hunt you down, and you're either going to go to jail or you're going to make payments, so the government doesn't have to. That's a pretty stiff thing. And they have laws that say you're supposed to, but it's virtually impossible to get to really enforce those. You know, very few guys are forced by the government to do it. It's only guys who actually have real jobs that they go to, that they can come in and attach their wages if they refuse to pay. But even then, you have to go through court stuff. And again, if the wife or the ex-wife or the ex-lover doesn't want that guy in their life, the easiest thing to do is not require them to have to pay anything, because then they might have to allow the kid to go to visit this guy, and they don't want to have nothing to do with him, right? So there's all that emotional stuff that's all tied in with that too. Any other ideas that you could do from a legislative standpoint?
Be an informed voter. So who you're voting for, what they are going to invest in, what they're going to put their power towards. It's really hard to find information, but like, you don't know who you're voting for, and then you just vote for them because you think, oh, well, they might do something.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the point. You guys are people who are going to inherit a broken system. It's clearly a broken system, and it's a system that will ultimately collapse the economy that you live in, right? Make it harder for you to have sustenance, because you can't just direct huge amounts of money at people who are just non-productive or living a lifestyle where they're just putting their hand out and they just crank out kids. And so it's going to be really up to you guys to step in and do something about that system. And as Christians, you've got the answer. Because back to the way I started this, it's really obvious that God has made a design. He's given a design, and it's a design that works. And it's a design that brings health, it brings mental stability, it brings social stability, financial stability, it brings all those things in. And it was designed exactly by God of how He wants us to live. So we model it, we talk about it, we bring it up in discussion, we inform ourselves of this kind of stuff and say, hey man, did you know? And you guys are the impetus of being able to change your culture. Now you might go, this is not the gospel. Why would I spend my time not just talking about Jesus? Okay? And it is important to talk about Jesus, but it's also important that when there's a principle of God, because we're told the two commandments, love God, love other people. When we love other people, we want to see their lives flourish. And by stepping in and having these kind of conversations, we actually help ensure that our culture and the people around us, that they flourish. All right. So any questions about this? Have you heard this information before? Probably. Okay. But it's a real deal, and I'm sorry to say you've been handed a can of worms, but you guys can change it. And we have the people in this room that can do that kind of thing, yeah.
Do you have any examples, or like, have you heard of any examples of a nation coming back from immorality like ours?
Yeah, United States in the 1920s. United States in the 1920s was heading down a rat hole. And it took the Great Depression. The Great Depression solved it. It created such financial ruin that people stopped their excesses and they turned around. And so the 30s were extremely different than the 20s. It was a sociological change, but it changed the arc of where everything was going. From what they called the Roaring 20s, it was really the immoral 20s. It was pretty wild. And you've seen the movies with the gangster movies and stuff like that. But that stuff changed in the 30s. And then the war changed it too. World War II changed it too, because nobody had time to screw around with any of that kind of stuff. They're all busy trying to kill Germans and Japanese. But yeah, I've seen it change, and it can change. The Romans didn't do a very good job. They lost their nation, but it took them a few hundred years. But that's kind of a whole different scenario too. But it can change.
The other thing we can do is pray.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, you will see in your lifetime, you will see some really interesting things and shifts of culture that just blow your mind. But just because the pendulum goes out here doesn't mean it can't swing back the other direction. All right. Thank you for listening. Again, this is just a one-off. I knew a lot of you guys were in seminars today. I want to throw something at you that was a little bit different. And I'll have a word of prayer, and then you guys are free to go. Father, just thank you for the fact that you created a pathway, a blueprint for how we ought to live our lives. When it comes to our sexuality, when it comes to our relationships, you've laid that out loud and clear. May not only we be wise enough to step into that blueprint ourselves, but learn how to share that blueprint with other people and why it makes sense and why you have our thriving and our flourishing deep in your heart. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, guys. Trent's asking to dinner tonight, right?